So this is the Atlanta Tableau User Group, and this is Bring Your Boss to ATUG Day. Our goal with this meeting was really to expand a little bit of what we normally do with our time together. Often I think we focus on the development and the analysis and really speak to the champions in the Tableau community, particularly here in Atlanta. But what we wanted to do today was step back and really kind of see the forest instead of just some of the trees, and step into a much more strategic mindset, and start to think about, if you are an analyst or a developer and you want to continue your career in the long term in the space of data and analytics, what are some of the things that your leadership is thinking about? What are some of the things that are happening in the industry that you need to be aware of for the next 3, 4, 5 years in the future? And so our goal today is to have a great series of conversations in that space. But before we get there, and we do have a great lineup for you today. Before we get there, I do want to kick it over to my co-host, Ms. Karen Henson. Karen, we were just speaking a minute ago about the new normal. So why don't you give us a heads up on what's going on over there?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of you can probably relate to these photos. I'm sure a lot of folks are in the same boat, and homeschooling, doing virtual school with their kids. I know a lot of parents with young kids are in the same boat. We have an exciting announcement to make today. We're adding to the ATUG leadership team for the first time in a while, and there are definitely a lot of advantages to taking a team approach and doing this together, just sharing responsibilities even between Nelson and I. It's been a blessing to have someone in it with you, but I'm personally grateful for a little extra help during this particular season. You guys know I'm a mom, and Adam and I have 4 children. Our oldest is 8, so we have a 2nd and 3rd grader now, homeschooling both of them this school year. So in Georgia, that means it's a requirement of like 4.5 hours a day. I don't know that I'm like following that to the letter of the law, but it's pretty intense no matter what, on top of 40 hours of work. That's a lot for families to juggle and take on, and it was the right decision for our family, but it definitely hasn't been easy. And I share all this to explain not only why it makes sense at this point to bring another leader on to the group. I'm not going anywhere. Nelson and I will be around, but we definitely think this is kind of the right decision to make sure that we've got people pouring time and energy into ATUG and keeping it going. But I also think this is an issue that affects a lot of folks, working parents, and in particularly women. And we talk a lot about women in data, and I'm just personally feel convicted that there's probably a lot of folks with young kids right now feeling kind of forced out of either their work, having to make difficult decisions about scaling back work, going part-time, working, not working, but also maybe choosing to not participate in the way that they otherwise would have just in the community. And this is such a tight-knit community, and I think people are so engaged that I just wanted to reach out and encourage others if they feel that way. We just had Tableau Iron Viz, and I've heard from folks participating in different discussions like Tableau Conference that there's always a push, get more women to enter contests like that and participate. And I think this highlights kind of one example of why it can be really difficult to do that. Just the reality of life and balancing family responsibilities and work and interest and hobbies. And it's just a challenge. So if there's anything that we can do as a community to encourage one another, support one another, perhaps we can kind of try to come together during a time like this.
And Karen, to that end, I think you and I are both excited to have a little bit more horsepower, and excited to have this announcement right here that Miss Anna Ford is going to be joining our talented team as a third co-leader.
Yes.
Anna, why don't you introduce yourself to the
Not
group
that
real
you're
quick?
new.
Not
You've
that
been
you're
around.
new, obviously, but
I
yes.
I'm really excited to join because I think, and the three of us mesh so well. We have very similar. Nelson, how old is your oldest?
My oldest it is his birthday today. My man is turning 9 years old, Luke Davis, in the
So
house.
no longer do we all have our oldest 8. My oldest is 8. Karen's oldest is 8, and now Nelson's is 9. So we're all swimming in a very similar canoe.
Technically, he was born at 4 p.m., so we can still go with it.
Oh, okay, good. 8, all 8. And
There
so I'm really excited to be part of this team. From the very first time I joined the Atlanta Tableau user group, the very first meeting, I remember Mark was speaking, and I just wanted to meet all these people who I'd know who they were. And Nelson welcomed me in, and I always joke with him, and I always thought, is this guy being really nice to me, or is he fake nice? I can't tell. And then I realized everybody in the Tableau community was real nice. I wasn't used to that, from the South, so you hear bless your heart, you don't know what they mean. So Nelson welcomes me in, and so did the other teammates. And that was Andy Piper was like, hey, Anna, do you want to give a talk sometime? And sure enough, 2 months later, I give a talk, and I felt really easy to get plugged in here. And I'm really excited to give back and do whatever I can to make this group useful for other people who use this either to learn data visualization and Tableau, or just for networking purposes, to just build each other up, as Karen was saying. This is for women especially, and then I can only speak to that because I'm a woman, but right now, this is a really hard time to juggle that career and profession with all those other responsibilities right now. I have to lock my door so the kids don't run in, that kind of thing. So again, I just appreciate being able to help and work with you guys.
And we're super excited to have you.
We are. This is going to be great.
Absolutely. All right. This is not the only big and awesome announcement we have. We have kind of one more big one before we get to the main show. Myself and Nathan Senabrini, who's also a friend of ATUG, have the good pleasure of announcing that we are starting a podcast called The Titans of Data. The idea of this podcast is very aligned to what we're talking about today. It is all about the concepts of leadership as it pertains to the space of data and analytics. And so what we're looking to do is have some very authentic discussions with leaders in this space about, both what has driven them towards success, but also where they've found failure in this space. Data analysis is one of the most innovative industries in today's world. And we want to be talking about, what can we learn from each other and how can we grow together? And our goal is ultimately to create a community that focuses on this vision of equipping and inspiring the next generation of data and technology leaders. So as of this morning, our first episode, 000, the intro is live. If you take out your phone and hit that QR code, you will be taken to a webpage and you can subscribe with Spotify. I think the Apple podcast not quite up yet, but you can kind of check us out there. And then the first episode's up there. The next episode, kind of episode 1, will be focused on beginning with the end in mind, which is a Stephen Covey habit. And then this panel discussion that we're going to have today, we're planning for that to be the second podcast. So super excited for this, and love to chat with anybody if you've got any ideas or anything like that. So super pumped for that. Karen, do you want to tell us about what's coming up?
Yes, sure. So our next meeting next month, it will be September 17th. I want to say that meeting was originally scheduled for Chick-fil-A, but unfortunately it will be virtual once again. But we're looking forward to hearing from Carl Redette. Everyone knows Carl, and Kelly Cronert, who runs the COVID, and I'm going to say it wrong. What is her site called? She's looking at COVID data for the state of Georgia, and she's doing a great job analyzing all that data and putting it a lot of it out there in really insightful ways.
COVID-Georgia.com says the panel.
Yes.
There you go.
Definitely check it out ahead of the next meeting. And then we also have a meeting planned for October. We don't have everything nailed down for that one yet, but it's going to be right before Halloween. And make sure you check out the Tableau.
So wear your mask.
Yeah. We've got the Tableau, ATUG Tableau public dashboard. Go check it out, and it stays up to date, connected with all the future meetings. You'll have links on there to the YouTube videos. So it's just a good resource. Just remember to just check that one out.
Awesome. And with that, it is my good pleasure to welcome our first speaker of the day, Steve Wexler. Steve needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. Steve is a Tableau Zen Master Hall of Famer. He is an Iron Viz champion. He is a Tableau training partner and co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards, Visualizing Your Data in Real-World Business Scenarios. Steve is going to be talking to us today about inspiring change with data visualization. Steve, it is an absolute pleasure to have you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass you the ball if possible.
Okay, thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Let me get this queued up. You should probably now see a totally blank screen. And hopefully something on that screen at this point. So, inspiring change with data visualization, and subtitle of this is "You May Not Change the World, but You Can Change Your Organization." I'm founder, principal, sole employee of Data Revelations. Indeed, I was Tableau's inaugural Iron Viz champion. That was back in 1964 for the IBM 360. Tableau for the IBM 360 was an incredible product. This group knows Tableau Zen Master. That's an actual thing. If I hand it to someone who's not in the community and I hand them a card, although who's handing cards to anybody right now, hand somebody a card and says Tableau Zen Master, they probably think, God, this guy's a complete tool. You know, who puts Tableau Zen Master on his own card? I am certainly very proud of those two achievements, Iron Viz and Tableau Zen Master. But the thing I'm most proud of within the data visualization community is being one of the three authors of the Big Book of Dashboards. I've started putting this slide in every presentation I give, and that is, you are encouraged to disagree with me. Good stuff happens as we debate these things. So if you think I'm mistaken, or what any of that I'm saying doesn't align with your experience, I'd like you to articulate that. I won't be able to see it in the chat right now, but maybe in Q&A, or you can send me an email. But good stuff happens when we debate this stuff. Speaking of debating things, just if you could type into chat, how many of you have seen this data visualization? If you've seen it, give me a yes.
Lots of
Yep,
friendlies here,
I'm not
Steve.
surprised. This is a very, this is a particularly well-schooled and erudite Tableau user group and steeped in data visualization. And Edward Tufte, the author of The Visual Display of Quantitative Data and Beautiful Evidence and several other books, has described this as perhaps the best statistical graph ever drawn. Although, you know, I don't know anyone who can look at this thing and know immediately what's going on, what it's about. Someone has to walk you through it. But it said, this may be the best statistical graph ever drawn. And it's shown in practically every data visualization class and webinar and seminar and presentation. How many of you have seen this? If you've seen the Nightingale rows, she actually referred to them as wedges. If you've seen this, let me know. So Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing, was also a polymath and extremely well steeped in statistics and science, and made some stunning data visualizations, including this one, which is showing the changing sanitary conditions at the Scutari Hospital in Turkey during the Crimean War. This data visualization changed the British healthcare system. And I look at it and I think, well, couldn't you have displayed this as a bar chart? And a lot of pundits, including friend and colleague and someone whose work I cannot recommend enough, Alberto Cairo, wrote of this, I believe Nightingale's goal wasn't just to inform, but also to persuade with an intriguing, unusual, beautiful picture. A bar graph conveys the same message effectively, but it may not be as attractive to the eye. So I will see people going to lectures, reading books, and pundits touting the Menard visualization, the John Snow cholera map, the Nightingale rose, and they've got to come away from this thinking, I guess I should be making charts like these, right? No, you shouldn't be making charts like these. In fact, in my head, I'm going to channel comedian Lewis Black, who would say, no, you shouldn't be making charts like these. There, that felt better. Critical. You must be thinking about who is your audience and what's the message? What are you trying to tell them? And I've got to tell you, Menard and Nightingale absolutely knew their audiences. Menard's expectation was someone would be sitting at a sophisticated, educated person sitting at a drawing room table with a ruler. So that person, and I'm going to say he, because at the time it was probably he, thank goodness for people like Nightingale saying, no, we can do as good, if not better, with a ruler, measuring the legend and then comparing it to the chart. Can you imagine showing the Nightingale chart to a busy executive right now, and they're saying, oh my God, this looks amazing. Let me get my protractor so I can better understand this. So the problem for me is a lack of connecting the dots and understanding, wait a minute, how can I take that and apply it to my work now? And you're probably not going to. There are some cases where a flow map can be used in modern data visualization. I'm going to show you one. But what I think people are starved for with these things are looking for real world examples. So I'd like to share some with you, where things that they may not have changed the world, but they absolutely changed their organizations. So I want to discuss the company Simalp. They're a French manufacturer that designs technical outdoor clothing. The e-commerce division of the company needed a way to monitor on a daily basis click-to-purchase activity for every product it offers via its website. Most important measures, conversion rate and how much they spend. This is the built-in dashboard that came with the whole system. And you know, I've got to say it's attractively formatted. It is completely useless. They cannot glean any insights from this thing. They're looking at it. They want to know what's going on in their business, but it didn't help them at all. Enter Dorian Benatuau from Romania and his firm Canonicalize. There we go. I love his work. And I love this dashboard. It's a little more nuanced than a lot of the stuff that I'll be showing today, but felt it was worth going into. So let me focus on the top of the dashboard. First of all, we have the the big ass numbers at the top, or bands, saying here are 3 key metrics, and I'm going to tell you what the colors mean. The teal means this, the pinkish means this, and the gray means this. So conversion rate, conversions, and the number of sessions, the number of interactions. So we can see, hey, we had a lot of interactions via, cost per click. And this is the number of actual conversions, that little small pink bar. And this thermometer chart here indicates we only have 3.4% conversions. Versus here, look at the length of that bar. It's about the same for email, but the overall, the gray bar is a lot wider. So that's why we're getting in that thermometer chart, we're seeing it way more filled. So that's the top part. Here's the bottom part of the dashboard. And again, just a great job of explaining what these things mean. This explains, hey, unique purchases divided by detailed views, that's the product conversion rate. This thing, holy crap. This is a bar in bar in bar chart. I can count on one hand where I've seen that work, but it's the views, the adds to cart, and the purchases. Wow, what a great way to show that. And then here is the spend that is on the stuff. And then I love the power of the little red dot going, oh, you got a problem right here, because you're not getting a lot of conversions, but you're spending a lot of money. And the impact was ridiculous. completely changed the way the company runs its e-commerce business. The CEO, the head of operations, the head of marketing review this every morning. Also, I got to show you something that I think he did really well. It's brilliant because I see it happen all the time in data visualization, this particular issue. Here is something that Jeff Schaefer and I give workshops on the Big Book of Dashboards, and this is an assignment that we do towards the end where we say, hey, we want you to visualize some data, including this. And we want you to show how much ahead or behind goal is north, south, east, and west. How would you show that? And most people come up with this mechanism. Oh, I can see how far below goal I am, how far above goal I am. But astute attendees, and there are lots of astute attendees that attend this workshop, will say, but wait a second, what are the actual goals? It looks like east is really short of hitting its goal, but was its goal $50,000 or $50 million? And is west more than making up for it? So in fact, this, maybe you want to show it this way, where the vertical line is individualized for each of the different regions. And you can see east, I'll change my little clicker here so we can focus on it. East, they don't have a big goal. So west exceeding its goal more than makes up for it. Well, how does Dorian handle this? He did both. He's showing the actual here and the percentages, and in a really compact area in a way that would only take him about a minute to explain to a stakeholder how to read. So I've got a lot more examples, including there's a great one from JLL, the firm where Simon Beaumont works, and I know Simon has joined us today. Don't have time to show that one. What I do is want to show you 3 quick ones where it's just a single visualization that made a difference. One chart that ended up creating sort of shock and awe. And I'm going to start with your own Nelson Davis, and was tasked with helping an airline better get a handle on the different markets, where a market is defined as connecting between 2 cities. And how do I get from Raleigh-Durham to Seattle, given that there are no direct flights? And what he was tasked with doing was, before he got there, they'd print out 5 11 by 17 spreadsheets, these enormous things, and they'd find a number on one spreadsheet and look it up on a different spreadsheet and try to glean understanding from it. He was asked, hey, can you at least just put everything in one place so we can see it all at the same time? So here's a snippet of a rather mammoth dashboard that he put together. And, but he was frustrated. He's saying, wait a second, this is just a bunch of numbers. Hey, it's great, and they're all in one place, but it's just a bunch of numbers. Why not show this on a map? To which they responded, well, we tried a map, it didn't work. Please don't try making a map again. Well, because the map they created was just, showed the United States, and it just had a bunch of cities on it. They hadn't seen the right map. They hadn't seen what would happen if you had a flow map. So you can imagine what Nelson did. Yes, he channeled Charles Minard, but he didn't put that thing in there. He put this in there, and it had an incredible reaction from the people who knew the numbers and looking at this, but they had never really seen the degree to which this Atlanta to Seattle market was so important to the bottom line. It wasn't that Nelson had discovered a new number. They had always known the numbers. It was seeing it this way, one single chart that just changed everything. And they realized, oh my gosh, we have to protect this because of the revenue it's producing. And how do they reward Nelson? By asking him to visualize a whole bunch of different markets the same way. All right, let's move to another good friend of Tableau, someone who's been involved with Tableau for a long time. This comes from Greg Lewandowski, and does wonderful work. And the company he was working for had over 25,000 different partners. And they wanted to get a handle on, well, who are our biggest partners? So someone said, you know what? Let's see our top 10 partners, our top 25 partners, our top 50 partners. And Greg said, why are you doing that? Why, those are arbitrary numbers. Why don't we look to see how many partners make up the first 25% of our income? If you were to rank them from highest to lowest, and then the next 25% of our income. And when he told me about this, I said, oh, I know where you're going with this. This is going to be a Pareto chart, you know, where you're going to see that 80% of your income is coming from 20% of your partners. He then showed me the actual data, and it's like, whoa, 80% of the income is just coming from 1% of the partners. But let me show you how he ended up showing it to people, because it's pretty potent. And he started with this. Here are all our partners. That's 25,000 dots. And Nelson, could you do me a favor? Make sure I didn't over or undercount this, especially with an election coming up. I want to make sure they're exactly 25,000.
2,
Thank you.
3.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, if you can
Yep.
mute your microphone while you're doing that, that would be great. He said, here are the top partners that are responsible for 25% of our income. Here are the top partners that are responsible for 75% of our income. Greg referred to this as the jawbreaker because it was the sound of people's jaws dropping and hitting the table when they saw it this way. Yes, they just applied 2 different filters. It wasn't just one chart, but it engendered or generated a whole bunch of discussions around this, which is, my gosh, so few are responsible for so much of our income. These top tier partners, were they always there? Were they lower tier? Did they move into something higher? What happened with this? That's a great dashboard or visualization, by the way. One that doesn't just answer questions, but gets you thinking about a whole bunch of things you hadn't considered before. Now, I am keenly aware that one of the most esteemed Tableau user groups in the world, I'm advocating the use of a packed bubble chart, which is pretty rare. But it's kind of this particular use case of it. I don't need to make exact comparisons. Do I need to know that's 2,400 times as big as that thing, or it's 2,600 times as big? So if you were to ask me, how many times out of 100 should I use a bar or line chart for something eye-catching? I would say, 99 times out of 100, use the bar chart. But how would I express that? Probably like this. I don't need to make an exact comparison. It's just this massive amount. In any case, Greg's visualization was super simple, and it just struck a chord. Last one, I wish I could show the actual use case for this, but I didn't get permission. It's around resource scheduling, and an entity that believed they'd had to embark on a massive construction project. Let's say it was for conference rooms. Oh my gosh, we don't have enough conference rooms. We need, either convert things or build a new building to accommodate this. And part of the problem was they kind of had siloed scheduling, like, oh, okay, I kind of own these conference rooms and you own those. So I'm going to schedule these things first and you're going to schedule those. And then the belief was that, there aren't enough rooms. And it was because you had these kind of, I own these 8 rooms, you own those 12, and it wasn't centralized or pooled scheduling. So they brought in an expert on this, on space utilization, and said, here's what you're actually doing. This is your capacity right now. Your goal, by the way, I kind of like this. It's a heat map with a marginal histogram along the top and along the side. And your goal is to, for these things to be occupied. Otherwise, it's wasted space. You want to be at 65%. So you've got the hour of the day along the top, you got the day of the week along the side. And said, because you're scheduling, this is your scheduling now, this is what it would be if you use a pooled scheduling system. Things would be filled, you'd still have plenty of capacity. And this is the second time that I've seen a resource scheduling system make a huge difference. No one believes it until they see it visualized this way. Same thing happened in one of the chapters for the Big Book of Dashboards, the operating room utilization. They didn't believe it until they saw, this is what you had, this is what it would be if you do this right. The impact in all these cases was just a single chart, maybe applying a filter, and it had everybody give an aha. I do want to show a couple of things that haven't come to and the possibilities when you are a possibilist. And those of you who know that word possibilist know I must be talking about Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling was a Swedish professor of global health who, using data, stunning visualizations, and ridiculous homespun charm, changed the way people understood the world. I first became aware, as I think a lot of people did, with the TED Talk that he did in 2006, one of the most watched TED Talks ever. I show it in all of my workshops. In his book, Factfulness, which came out shortly after his death in 2017, Rosling describes himself as a possibilist. People often call me an optimist because I show them the enormous progress they didn't know about. By the way, just a side note, read Factfulness. It will make you feel a lot better about the world at a time when I think everyone wants to feel that way. In any case, being called an optimist, that makes me angry. I'm not an optimist. That makes me sound naive. I'm a very serious possibilist. That's something I made up. It means someone who's neither hopes without reason nor fears without reason, someone who constantly resists the overdramatic worldview. As a possibilist, I see all the progress, and it fills me with conviction and hope that further progress is possible. This is not optimistic. It is having a clear and reasonable idea about how things are. It is having a worldview that is constructive and useful. So I want to show you three possibilists within the data visualization community. First one comes from Klaus Schulte, Iron Viz champion, Tableau Zen master, professor of accounting and financial controls in Münster, Germany. And he wanted people, he was frustrated, not so much by accountants clinging to their spreadsheets, but that how difficult it was for people not steeped in accounting to understand balance sheets, profit and loss statements, etc. So we looked at the consolidated income statement of Alphabet Inc. Alphabet Inc. is the parent company of Google and has been working for quite a while to figure out, is there a way that I can make this have a visual impact that makes it clearer? He came up with this recently, and it just kicks ass. I would love to get into the particulars of it, but within a minute, I could explain to a layperson what the things mean, the inflows, the outflows, where money's coming from, where they're going, at each stage, how much, what our gross profit is, our net profit is, etc. And ridiculously clear. He's taken that whole bunch of numbers, and he still has his lovely numbers here, the same numbers, but has visualized it in a really compelling fashion. Next up comes from Amanda McCulloch. She is one of my partners in crime, along with Andy Cockreeve and Jeff Schaefer in Chart Chat. And she wanted to imagine lab test results. After her father had a second bout of kidney cancer, she submitted to genetic testing to see if she had the same genetic mutation. And it ends up she did, called Lynch syndrome. And she got something like this back, and a list of all these different body parts and the risk of cancer associated with it. And it was, oh my God, there's a lot of red, and oh my God, look at that number, and 82%, I have a 4 out of 5 chance of getting cancer. It was not well explained. Now, she, in addition to having a master's in public health, a statistical background, data visualization, she could make sense of this, but it was just, she thought it was criminal that why not present it like this, show the wide range of risk. And if you're wondering why is the general population, gosh, we know exactly what, it is in the general population, but your risk could be as low as this and as high as this. It's just the amount of data that they have. They just don't have that many people with that particular genetic marker. So there's a high margin of error. Last one comes from reimagining patient health histories. I don't know how many times you've gone to a new doctor, you're trying to get to the bottom of something, and you have to go through your entire health history and recite it. It can be overwhelming with people with rare, mysterious, or complicated health issues to relate their health histories to doctors. People feel pressured to remember what happened. The details are often trapped in medical records. Often, I know a lot of people don't feel like they're being taken seriously. So Katie McCurdy, founder of Pictal Health, has started, she's done this for 50 plus individuals and helped them visualize their particular stories. And she's looking to scale this. I can't get into the details of this, but the amount of information that's clear and related in a compact amount of space is truly stunning. And what she reports is that her clients, doctors are no longer just seeing them, they're being heard because of something like this. So I'm going to end briefly, but I want to share first my story around data visualization and then kind of discuss, well, what is your story going to be? People at the Atlanta Tug, I think this is the third time I presented, they know my background. If you go to my website and go to the About page, you'll discover, hey, my background is as a musician. And then there was a long hiatus, but in 2004, I discovered Motown music. I had always been into the Beatles, I'd been into jazz and Broadway, hadn't really loved Motown, but someone gave me a DVD of Standing in the Shadows of Motown. It is the mother of all music documentaries. It's about the Funk Brothers, the band that played, the backup band that played on more #1 hits than the Beatles, Elvis Presley, and the Rolling Stones combined. Now, I'm an electric bass player, and I absolutely fell in love with the first call bass player, the guy who laid down the grooves on all of these different tunes. His name was James Jamerson. And I became totally immersed in this. I transcribed all the music. I learned how to play this stuff. And a year later, I got hired to play in a really good local R&B band. And of course, I'm really nervous. This is the first night playing with the band. First set goes great. Second set, it's going to open with My Girl. Now, My Girl, if you know, hopefully if you're young, you had good parents and they exposed you to this type of music. In any case, it's a song by the Temptations. And it begins with a bass solo. So I'm going to play you a little bit of My Girl. At least I hope I am. Oh, system audio is not working.
Steve, we heard it, man. I was jamming to it.
Oh, outstanding. Very relieved. Okay. I should just keep, you know what, don't do the rest of the thing, just play the rest of it. There we go. In any case, people went nuts. Within 6 notes, everyone was up on the dance floor. I'm holding my bass, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at other people in the band and going, wow. I literally move people, and I wanted to do that again and again and again. All right, let's fast forward. It's the year 2014. Let me give you the setup for this. I'm working with a major healthcare company. They have data on thousands of companies and millions of people, and they were desperately trying to get people to buy into a system where they would ensure that employees and their families were compliant and mindful of nutrition. The cost savings and the life savings could be significant. How can they get people to buy into this? And they targeted the companies that had really bad incidents of things. So they were saying, how are we going to get this company to take this seriously? And they showed them slides. The incidence of diabetes in your organization is 18.5%. The average of all organizations is 4.9%. Or you rank 782 out of 790. It didn't strike a chord. They got it, but they didn't get it. They didn't feel it. They didn't have the flow map experience of like what Nelson had displayed. So we created a series of visualizations for them. We started with this, saying, that is 790 different companies, different organizations like yours, similar industry, similar part of the country. You know, it's a little hard to see because so many of the dots are overlapping. So let's scatter them out. So you can see a lot of the dots are clustering at the bottom. And in fact, you want to be at the bottom. You want the incidence of diabetes to be as low as possible. So we then showed this. Here's the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 70th percentile. So if you're up here, you're in the bottom 1%. I know you're thinking, well, wait a minute, shouldn't that be the top? No, this is something highly undesirable, an incidence of disease in your organization. So we kind of queued this up and said, you got it? That's 790 companies. Most of them are down at the bottom. Where is your organization? And it's here. And the reaction was palpable. For the first time, people really understood what it meant to be ranked 782 out of 790. The impact was, as I described, it's we get it. We want to do something about it. And in this case, I figuratively move people. But I had the same feeling I did when I was on the bandstand that night was, I want to do that again and again and again. Well, what is your story going to be with this? You know, especially so many people in this organization are already good at data visualization, and you're going to get better through your association with this organization. Well, always remember, think about who is your audience, as did Menard and Nightingale, as did my colleagues and I when I dealt with that healthcare organization. What's the message? And I would say, always strive to provide the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort. You may not change the world, but you absolutely can change your organization. And I know Paul is going to be talking about data literacy. A huge part of getting that win is making sure your organization appreciates the value that can come from charts and dashboards. And I'm excited to announce something publicly. I've not shared this picture image yet, except amongst a few people I've emailed. Thank you. New book is coming out, really aimed much more at the consumer of charts and dashboards, more so than the creator. The big picture, how to use data visualization to make better decisions faster. And that is, so the cover's done, the book isn't. And that is coming out in April of 2021. Hey, if you want to disagree with me, chime in or whatever, I'd love to hear from you. Come visit datarevelations.com, find out about workshops. You can follow me on Twitter, and delighted to jam with people either now or at a little pressed for time. We'll do it after, you know what, let's all meet at a virtual happy hour sometime. So with that, let me stop sharing the screen, and thank you, Atlanta Tug, for having me today.
Steve, such a great job. Really phenomenal work that you've shared. I'm honored that I got to be a part of that. That's super cool. We have time for, we're going to take two very quick questions, and then we're going to leave the questions open for you if you want to engage with the folks that are asking questions. You also got some great feedback coming through the chat as well. So the quick question, this is coming from Simon Beaumont. Question for Steve: does he feel animation has a place in the workplace? And if so, has he seen examples in the wild?
It is really hard not to pull Richard Nixon, who, when he was thinking about how he was going to answer something, would say, well, let me say this about that. So my response is the same as Ben Jones and other people, which is, great question. In fact, it's a really good question, but trying to formulate the answer. So one of the things I am constantly fighting organizations is, you know, you do way better if you printed less and clicked more. And instead of having these predefined decks that have I've seen 500-page decks, which has every different region and sub-region and filtering, and curate the key findings, top 10 things, then let people explore the dashboard. Animation is going to do a lot to show how things change when you apply filters, things like that. I think less so from a Hans Rosling Gapminder type of thing, but more from a pre-attentive attribute. I'm seeing how something is changing. I use that to explain jittering, by the way, is that I'll have everything in a strip plot, and I'll click something and people will see the dot scatter and go, oh, now I understand. There's no difference between the dot that goes from the left to the right. You just kind of push them out so that they're not all smushed on top of each other. So that's a great, simple way to use animation, and it gets the aha.
That's excellent. I've got one more question for you, Steve. Okay, this one is from Vince. All right, Vince is asking, when you used Nelson's Viz that had the map, but also like the table with all the numbers, you mentioned it was a useless table, but is there a place in DataViz for showing both in the same visualization?
So interesting, and Nelson may want to chime in. Usually one has to wean people off something which is a little stronger to see. For me, the gateway drug to data visualization is the highlight table. So, and I've got a whole fun thing with, I show an example around the propensity of a certain person to tweet. And you'll have the time of the day and the day of the week. And if you just show it as numbers, gee, I'm having trouble seeing something. You then make it a highlight table and you have the really deep pockets of color. Oh, they still have their numbers that they cling to, but they can get a little bit more. Then you build a marginal histogram around it and they go, oh, these bar charts that are being put around this thing, this is so even more useful. So we saw that with that resource planning example. Just numbers, then highlight table, then the marginal histogram around it. I would say my bet is, as they get more and more comfortable with visualization, you will probably see fewer and fewer just text tables sitting in a dashboard. That's my guess. Nelson, you can certainly weigh
Steve,
in.
I think you nailed it. The thing that I would kind of say is, and Paul's going to talk about it in a minute, but the data literacy component of this, right? We all read, see spot run when we were first learning how to read. And to your point, if somebody's very used to numbers, we kind of need to pull them along. We can't do the Florence Nightingale visualization out of the box. And so I think there is a maturity that comes with the experience. So I echo exactly what you're saying. Awesome.
So I think that probably wraps up all the questions we have time for. Steve, thank you so much. This was really great. Everybody loved it. You should check out the comments in the chat. Thank you so much. I'm going to let Nelson introduce our panel next, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And as we're getting there, as we mentioned before, we're going to hopefully use this conversation as part of a future podcast. So I'll encourage our panelists to go ahead and hit record on whatever device you're using. And with that, I would like to introduce our amazing panel. Panelists, if you will hop on, if everybody would just kind of quickly go around, maybe Elissa, Rachel, Mark, then Nick, just 10, 15 seconds on who you are, kind of what your role is in today's world of data and analytics. And there you go. Let's rock and roll.
All right, you said my name first. So Elissa Fink, many of you might know me as former CMO of Tableau, or some of you might, and I'm a huge fan of ATUG, so congrats on just what an amazing group. I'm currently serving on some boards and advising companies, and I am a data advocate to the point, to the heart, to the brain, to the soul for all of those companies. I'm constantly pushing them to use data. So real pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nelson and team. It's really nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Rachel.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rachel Stuve. I'm currently a director of data science at Anthem in the healthcare space. I think we've all heard of Anthem. Had a background in healthcare analytics as well as manufacturing and sales, which goes from the whole gamut of visualization and data analysis to very pure machine learning automation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Mr. Mark Jackson.
Hey, Mark Jackson. I run the BI program at Piedmont Healthcare. We're a 11 hospital system in the Georgia area. Had the honor of being named a Tableau Zen Master in the past, as well as Exasol Expert, which is the database we use for analytics. And I've been at Piedmont for about, I guess, almost 11 years now.
Awesome. And Nick.
Hey, Nelson. Thanks for having me on. Nick Heigerick, Manager of Systems Development at Oldcastle Infrastructure. And my focus is kind of on all things development, but was originally brought in to lead the BI and analytics for Oldcastle. And am helping just grow that into so much more as we try to bring our manufacturing group into kind of the 21st century with data-driven focus.
That's awesome. And just to set ground rules for everybody, so we've got a number of questions that we want to throw out to the panel. We're not going to stop a great discussion, so definitely want to dig into it with everyone. And again, the goal is we've got so many great kind of developers and analysts and champions who are amazing at doing things. And today, I think we also have some great leaders who have joined us as well. So our heart today is really kind of get behind the mindset of you all in positions of leadership in the space of data and analytics. And we would love for you to just share your thoughts and your direction on everything. So with that, I'll open this up with our very first question. So a little bit of backstory. Per the top 20 trends in data and analytics for 2020, Gartner believes that we will begin to see a decline of the dashboard, stating dynamic stories with more automated and consumerized experiences will replace visual, point-and-click authoring and exploration. As a result, the amount of time users spend using predefined dashboards will decline. The shift to in-context data stories means that the most relevant insights will stream to each user based on their context, role, or use. These dynamic insights leverage technologies such as augmented analytics, NLP, streaming anomaly detection, and collaboration. The question for our panel: do you believe interactive visual analysis will be in greater or lesser use in 5 years? Elissa, we'd love to have you kick us off with your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good points, Nelson, thank you. But I think interactive visual analysis will be in greater use. Now, the passive dashboard, well, first of all, dashboards will always be in use. They're great monitoring tools, a quick glance, you know the dashboard, you know what to look for, blam, things are on or they're off. It tells you to explore or not to explore, ask questions or not ask questions. So I think to that extent, the dashboard will always live, I think. But in particular, I think what's interesting about this question is I do think interactive visual analysis is going to continue to explore. And all those technologies that Gartner cites are going to be part of that. In fact, because the information streaming to you is going to be more in context, more relevant, instead of seeing these passive dashboards or visualizations that don't quite hit what your interest is and you sort of go by them, it's actually going to engage you, and it's going to engage you to ask the next questions. And as much as we'd like to believe, and maybe the day will come when AI and these new technologies will deliver exactly the information directly to the electrodes in our brain and we won't even have to think, that's not going to be what's going to happen. It's going to surface stuff for you that is in context, and you, the human, being creative and having many experiences that the machine doesn't necessarily bring to it, are going to ask additional questions. So I actually think those technologies are going to bring people more to data and more to wanting to be active with data. And there's no better way to understand data than to have it be visual. Steve just proved that. I mean, everything you showed was so on the money to prove that. It's just going to engage people even more. And the information being more contextually relevant can only add to that formula. So I don't know. I mean, Mark or Nick, Rachel, your thoughts about that?
It's funny, I remember thinking when I started this Tableau journey, probably 9 years ago, that I would set up all these interactive dashboards, I would automate the back end of it, deliver data to it, and I'd be able to go to the golf course and play golf all day, and it would be amazing. But it's just not turned out that way. The more information you expose to people, the more questions they have. And if I've learned anything over the years, is that no single dashboard can ever answer all the questions that are out there. So I don't think that interactive visual analysis is going away. I agree it's going to increase that, the more data products you put in front of somebody, the more questions that people are going to have. With that said, we are moving more towards like a person level attributed KPI sort of analysis with a metric framework that we're building. We want to do things that are in a really scalable way. And so there's a single place that people can go to for information that's relevant to them, that we're pushing, and have the ability to customize that experience to the user based on who's actually logged into it, offer full transparency. So there's never any question about how something is built. But then when they have that next level of question, the data sources that are behind this thing are available to use for more traditional kinds of dashboards. So you can ask more questions. And then if those dashboards don't answer all your questions, then there are self-service data sources behind these things too that people can access. So I think it's going to increase, not decrease over the years, just because there's going to be more demand.
Yeah, I also think there's an element, not to count on anybody else, but where as we, as people age out of the workforce and age into the workforce, it's just more knowledge of data and how to use data and computers and coding and programming. It's almost a native skill. I mean, what our kids are learning in school, you're like, I didn't really learn that until high school or college, what have you. So I think the skills are going to be better too. And so to be hands-on with the data, it's kind of like, I remember when I started my first job, my boss used to long handwrite out his letters and then give it to a secretary to type. Like, yeah, you don't see that ever anymore. And I think the same thing. I mean, people talk about that, but I do think there's an element that people are going to be a little better with data and just doing it themselves and wanting to do it themselves, even at executive levels, not being super coders or supervisors, but being, reasonably competent, I think. So I don't know, you guys have a thought on that too.
Yeah, I think when I read this question, to me, it really becomes kind of like contextual in terms of, well, what industry are you in? Or, how has your company grown? Or, how data savvy or data literate is this space that you're in? I think there are plenty of industries where, data and analytics means Excel still today. And something like Tableau is revolutionary, and you show them a bar chart and they think it's amazing. But there's other industries like banking and healthcare where data is just the fabric of what they do. So in my mind, that's where I go. That's what I think. Point and click, I think, will be around. It is super helpful for us, and but I am very excited about these other things, and that's where, obviously, as a technologist, as someone who wants to help a company accelerate faster, I hope we get to these things. Now, will it be in 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I definitely think it depends what industry, because there are some industries that are farther along in the democratization of data, and in which case there's just I've seen dashboard burnout, where people now, they've been around data and analytics and insight, and they want to start going to that kind of, quote, next level with natural language processing, or you talk about streaming anomaly detection. I see that in industries that are a bit more advanced. But then the industries that maybe aren't quite as farther along, it is very much where a dashboard can give insights that they previously never had. Something simple of just logistics or sensors in a manufacturing plant. In that case, dashboards are going to be very, very useful for those organizations still within the future.
Yeah, so I'll summarize this real quick and then move us to the next one. I think it'll be interesting to as we bring it all together, the combination of the visualization with the narrative. One of the things that I think that is really powerful about data storytelling, and Steve was sharing this a minute ago, was when you look at the narrative and the visualization, when you bring them together, they are greater than the sum of their parts from an impact perspective. And so I think, as y'all are all kind of saying, the visualization is not going to go away, but it's going to change, and how it changes, it seems like it's going to very much depend on the industry and the use case and the audience and the user and so forth. And it's going to be more tailored because it's going to know more about who it is that's looking at it on the other end. And so I love that piece. Our next question digs into a little bit of a pathway. And so we believe a simplified pathway toward a data-driven culture is to take analytics, which feeds into an insight, which dictates or leads to a strategy. Once the strategy becomes executed as a part of an organization, that leads to a particular culture. And when the culture is thriving with data that they've learned from, that is ultimately, quote, success, right? And so in order to achieve that success, an organization must transition from simply learning something insightful to actively doing things differently by infusing the changes into their culture. Rachel, we'll kick it off with you this time. How do you see successful organizations gaining that buy-in where the analytic insight changes the culture of the organization from the inside out?
Yeah, that's a really simple one, and it just results in execution. So if analytics insight increases revenue or finds missed sales opportunities or can increase automation, which saves overhead. Those are the types of numbers and actual business execution that leaderships pay attention to, and that actually then will push that culture throughout the organization and find success.
Do you have any tips on winning the hearts and minds as the analytics leads to that insight, which then kind of leads to culture and infusing, hey, we've learned this, and now we want to go and share it and actually change the way the culture actually functions?
Yeah, so my experience has been when you actually can make someone's job easier, then they tend to become a big fan of analytics and what you do. So there are sometimes organizations that kind of see analytics as overhead or, yeah, we have to do that. But if you can actually go into a room and with a user or a leader and actually make their job easier, then absolutely they become your biggest fans. I have been part of projects where some of the most active dissenters or the people that were the most negative at the beginning of the project, when they actually started realizing that they spent less time manipulating data, or they spent less time trying to remediate to systems, or they had actual insights where they were able to close a sale faster, then those people have become my best friends. And they're advocates for the power of it. And then they actually become really active, where I've had those people that were the strongest dissenters then subsequently turn and say, hey, I've got a really good idea where we could expand, or what about this? And then that naturally builds that culture throughout the organization.
That's awesome. Nick, you and Mark are both really passionate about this. What would you like to add here?
Yeah, I think, so I agree. And I think what Rachel was explaining is almost kind of an organic, bottom up kind of successful implementation of analytics. I think, again, I got to take it back to the context for which you're working in and go, well, Oldcastle's grown by acquisition for many, many, many years, which poses certain challenges. And so for us, I feel like it almost had to go the opposite way. It had to kind of come top down, and we had to look at gaining alignment so that we could partner with the correct leaders across the business and gain consensus. And then that allowed us to provide insight to narrow that insight and then have a strategy and achieve kind of the culture change that we're talking about here.
Yeah, so from my perspective, and being at Piedmont for nearly 11 years now, I've definitely seen our organization shift to being very data-driven. And I'd like to be able to take credit for that and say, it's owing to the BI program that we built and all the cool technology that we put in place. But the truth is, it just wasn't. There's a part of it. And I think that the grassroots approach of, trying to show people a better way of doing things and being more efficient can help and is necessary for the whole picture to be successful. But you're just ultimately not going to be successful at a company if your executive leadership team isn't data-driven. And that really was the tipping point for us. We got in some executives that were very data-driven in the way they approached things. They valued what we did. They were very focused on KPIs, what metrics are driving our organization, which then forced the leaders to be very data-driven. On top of that, from a technical, leadership standpoint, you've got to have a good balance of having a bold vision for somebody to follow, but being able to balance your stables and your volatiles in your organization. And if you're not familiar with that concept, there's a blog called Rands and Repros that talks about it. And I think it's really good insight to look at your technical staff and try to make sure that you can break free of the status quo, but also build something that's scalable and works. So it's really going to be both things. It's going to be from the technical side, pushing to have a COE, grassroots approach, but also making sure you're in an organization where the executive leadership values what you do and wants to be a data-driven organization.
Yeah, it does seem like you need both bottoms up and top down. And without either, it's so much more of a struggle. I mean, Rachel, and I've seen those stories, and when, the organization doesn't support it, but you still have some departments or some users or some people that are making some great stuff happen, and they can, but they kind of can't get it to grow past what they, what they're in control of, or, their world. But when you have that sort of fostered environment from management executive who is like looking for those opportunities to bring those wins and those successes forward and show people how it does make their jobs easier and their lives easier, and they get promotions and they're smarter and the more success. Boy, when that comes together, it's an unbeatable combination. But it really does help tremendously to have both those things.
We have a question, if you guys don't mind me stepping in. This is a great question from Brooke, and it says, how do you handle situations where people in analysis positions that do much of their work manually seem to be threatened by automation capabilities of BI?
Can I take that?
Absolutely.
So first of all, I think this question actually goes to a broader context, because there's a lot of jobs out there that get threatened by the automation of data, right? And seeing it in several different industries. And so I think what helps is showing people that it doesn't threaten your job. It gives you the ability to do more. It gives you the ability to do something new. And then if there's people in your organization that don't want to be continual learners, then that's something you should consider, whether or not that's a part of your culture you want to have, but yeah.
I totally agree, Nick. I think, if you're running into people that see automation as a threat, maybe they're not a right fit for the culture that you're trying to build. You really want people that see that as an opportunity. Wow, if I didn't have to spend 2 weeks out of the month pulling data and manipulating in a spreadsheet or something, I could then move on to do this other role, and it gives me more opportunities in the organization to show my value. I think those are the people that you want to have in your company culture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that hero mentality, right? They want to be the hero. That's not necessarily what drives a business forward. It really moves the needle.
Yeah.
I know, I certainly remember when I first got into Tableau, I kind of said, I feel like I used to do 80% of my time on data prep and 20% of my time analyzing it. And one of the things that I've always said to clients or people I've worked with is, what if we could spend 80% of our time analyzing the data and just 20% of our time prepping it and getting it ready for that analysis? What could we learn about our organization that would help it thrive if we had that truly in that capability in our hands? And so I'm right there with you. We're going to skip through number 3. This is actually number 4 is a very interesting one in kind of the same vein as organizations are trying new things in the analytics space. The question says, what suggestions do you have for doing decision intelligence, which basically means, is it working? Who needs to be at the table? What tips can you share for beginning with the end in mind? In context, Gartner defines decision intelligence as a framework to help data and analytics leaders design, model, align, execute, monitor, and tune decision models and processes in the context of business outcomes and behaviors. Anybody want to step up to the plate on that one?
I'll start. So who should be at the table is absolutely stakeholders, from the users to the leadership. The projects that I've seen be most successful are the projects where users are to some extent involved in the beginning, because ultimately they're the consumers of it. And so if the product doesn't fit your need, or it doesn't fit their need, or it's difficult to use, no matter how great the insights may be, people won't use it. And then I've seen projects that have just died because of that. So I think all of the panelists have really echoed with starting with the users in mind, and how are they using it, in what environment, what are they looking for, just the nature of when they interact or how often they may interact with that. So that absolutely has to be a beginning point to design any type of analytics project.
And for us at Piedmont, we have a corporate purpose that says that we want to have a positive impact on every life we touch. It's not exactly tied in specifically, with healthcare. You could read that and think, I don't really know what industry you're in. It's very similar to Chick-fil-A's corporate purpose. So I'm sure Karen recognizes elements of that. And we, I think, kind of borrowed that from y'all to some extent. But we build everything around that. And we have a plan on a page that at the center of that is quality. And that's quality and service of the patient, surrounded by stewardship and strategic growth, and ensuring we have the right talent in place. And we build everything around that. What are the outcome metrics that influence our ability to achieve our purpose and live up to the goals that are on our plan on a page. And we have operational metrics that surround those things. And so that helps us answer the question, is this working to actually influence those outcome metrics? But it's really important to ensure that when you're delivering this data, it's to people that have the power to do something about it. If you're giving people data and pretty dashboards that are really cool and they don't have the power to make actual change as a result of the indicators they see in the data, then it's not going to make a difference. You're just making pretty pictures for people to look at.
Yeah.
I love that you attach that, you attach it to your purpose. Like, that's so great. And then of course, change, like what's the point if you can't change things, give people the power to change. I think that's so critical. And I think, change is hard for people. And so I also think, how do you know who needs to get a table? Rachel, you're right on the money. That feels so right. Getting to the beginning in mind, with the end in mind, beginning with the end in mind, is also about the change in the people and preparing and letting them have all the resources and the time they need to change. It's going to take people time to figure out how to use data if they've never used it before, how to make sense of the data, how to make a finding. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have basic analytics that are going to be, not that impressive, but still important. And I think there's also that element of, like, if you're thinking about the users with as the end in mind, what the change they can enable, is make sure you're supporting them in every way to have that time and the resources to change, to use data, and then to make changes with data. So I love that you start with your purpose in particular, Mark, because that's where you want the changes around, serving the purpose.
Yeah. I want to speak to a couple other pieces of this question. So the first part's, what suggestions do we have for doing decision intelligence? I think one thing is, it's great if you can have a culture of what Steve was pointing out at the beginning of the meeting, which is, please challenge my thoughts. If you have a culture where you can disagree with one another and ask questions, that helps so much. Because it's that shared pool of knowledge that really makes any dashboard or analysis that much more valuable. And so that has to exist on both sides, right? The technologist maybe doing the development has to be willing to take that feedback that, hey, this doesn't really get at what we're trying to answer, or whatever. In the business, it has got to be receptive to, hey, well, I understand you want this, but this is kind of like what we're seeing in the data, and and kind of having that healthy conflict, it really brings out the best. I also think it really helps to be aligned when you're trying to put in a process together with the analytics. And I think that's a lot what Mark was talking to. It's like, okay, we want to go reform, the way we do sales or the way we do whatever we do, and thinking about, okay, what kind of process change does this take, and what kind of analysis would we need to do to help people see that this is the way forward? So
I think y'all did a great job with this one. Nick, you kind of closed it out and talked about the alignment and the ability to disagree. And I think that to disagree and still walk out the door with everybody's heads held high in a respectful way, knowing that we're all working together. And I think that does a great job of leading us into our next question, which is historically, the common organizational challenge in this space has been the balance between data governance and data democratization. And you could also kind of say between IT and the business. How has the relationship between IT and the business changed? And what does success, win-win, look like in the long term? What does the business need to understand better about what IT is trying to do? What shifts in thinking are required from IT as we consider the needs of the modern analyst? I think each of you sit in different places in your organizations. Nick, maybe have you kick this one off and then go back around the horn here.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I feel like so much of this is just trying to bridge the gap between the technologists and the business. As a technologist, my core interests are doing super cool things with computers and data, right? I'm like super entrenched. I want to read all the nerdy articles I can get my hands on. And I can get lost in that and lose sight of, okay, at the end of the day, we make concrete products that go in the ground, and there are a lot of core, order to cash processes, and manufacturing processes that I need to know so that all the cool stuff I'm reading and learning and want to apply fits and is making us better. And so from a technologist side, it's like, okay, it's awesome to know this stuff, and that's a really cool idea, but how does it make us better? And on the other side, I think the business doing whatever they can to say, be, like we've talked about a little bit, data literate, or, okay, understanding the different systems that have to come together, or that maybe all the data doesn't live in one place, or that, if I'm pulling from multiple systems, there's got to be a way to tie it all together. So I think it's bridging almost that personality gap and being one culture and one mindset.
Yeah, and it's also, totally right on the money there, because it's really like you just need each other. You just need each other. I used to characterize it as form versus substance. Like, if you don't have any form to your substance, then your substance is just all over the place. And if you just have form and nothing's flowing through it, then what's the point? You know what I mean? So IT being form and bringing formality and making things possible, and business being, I know what this means. I know that when I see this kind of data record or whatever, it means a sale happened, or it means something happened. So you really need both. And you're just so reliant on each other. And I think what's changed so much is in the old days, I admit it, I'm guilty of let me put a server under my desk, and how can I avoid IT as long as possible before I run into a brick wall, which always happens, that always happens. And then on the other side, the IT side, is sort of like, get out of my database, or get out of my data warehouse in the old days. You're just a user. This is my beautiful data warehouse and database. I don't want you using it. So seeing both sides become enlightened toward the needs and the interdependencies of each other over the last many years has been amazing. And I was telling Nelson, in the earliest years of Tableau, I used to talk about the old school IT and old school thinking about analytics, and enlightened IT, like the early people, like the people that are in this group, like Mark and Nick and so many, and Nelson and Paul. They're just like thinking about technology as like such the thing, such the enabler, but really this interdependency. I think the more people realize how interdependent we are on each other, the more you realize what's good for him or her is also going to be good for me. And sometimes we might have to compromise and, you know, argue and disagree and whatever and prioritize. But at the end of the day, I think more and more people realize, like, I can't be successful if I'm not successful together with the business and IT together. You definitely see that across the companies I talk to. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I could definitely talk for a while about this, but I'll be brief on my feedback. I think what's really important is regular and transparent communication to build trust between these groups. For us, that means constructing ourselves into agile sprint teams around certain business functional areas and having all of those people in the room together, planning their work in 2-week increments so that everybody understands what everybody's doing and giving regular communication about progress. For that, that's helped us tremendously.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think one of the biggest things that we can do as IT is really to simplify for the business. I think a lot of us in data and tech tend to get really excited. We see the potential, and then we go off of this deep end of technical conversation. And for a lot of people, their eyes just glaze over, and then they don't feel vested in it. They feel like it's some kind of department that's just sucking money out of the company, or, oh, just whatever's going on over there, I want to completely avoid because I feel so confused. So I think one of the biggest things really in the shift of thinking with IT is, don't think of it as IT versus business, but it really is a collaboration. And to simplify that in terms that the users will understand.
Yeah, to wrap this up, I love everything that y'all spoke about here, and we have certainly used kind of beginning with the end in mind as one of the things that we have talked about as a part of this conversation, which is habit number 2 from 7 habits. I think the habit here is synergy, and the idea that when we go together, we actually multiply each other. You know, we can be a magnifying force when we're aligned, but when we're fighting each other, we create negative energy. You know, there's a whole nother theory and thought around, you know, nothing moves faster than the speed of trust. And when the business and IT don't think that they have each other's best interest in heart, there creates that sense of distrust, right? And so to wrap us up, I want to close with this one because it's going to feed really well into Paul's conversation. So this is our last question. So while artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML, continue to create buzz in the space of data science and analytics, many organizations continue to live in spreadsheets, creating a widening gap in the analytic maturity model between different organizations. When it comes to creating a data literate culture at your organization, what should be the ultimate goal? What is your expectation of proficiency for the majority of your people, and why is this important?
Want to nominate anybody?
Elissa, you start us. Maybe you close us out.
Oh, sure. You know, I mean, to me, you know, it's like, what is your expectation for proficiency for the majority of people, or what's the ultimate goal? It's like, what immediately popped in my head is every decision asking the right questions of data, getting the data and asking the right questions. Now, there might be questions, or at least looking for the data, or looking for the kind of data-driven questions. And you might find there's lots of decisions, or there's really important decisions that have no data or no relevant data. But the fact that you could get your culture and your people to first think, well, what are the facts? Let's look at the data. Is there data to support this? I think it would be the mark of a successful data literate culture. The fact that it's like their first instinct is to go to the data, not to make that the data make the decision, to have the people make the decisions, but to be informed by the data, to be informed by facts, because there's so many instances where companies aren't like that. In fact, Nelson, you were saying 80-20, where you're 80 prep and 20 analyzing, and now you can do 80 analyzing. Well, the same thing happens without data and influencing every decision. It's like 80% opinions and 20 and conversations that go nowhere, and 20% finally doing something about that. But when you have the data and the facts at the center of the table, everybody's looking at it, everybody understands how to look at it, everybody asks good questions about the data, you can spend 20% of your time, arguing about the data, and then 80% strategizing about what we're going to do about this decision or this problem. So I think it's just like, if your culture turns to data first, even when it's not there, but thinks data first and wants to use data to inform themselves to make better decisions, that seems like a data literate culture to me. I don't know if you guys, it's been a while since I've been practicing it, but yeah. But Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, I'll hop on to that. I definitely agree, starting with the question. But I would add on to that a data literate culture, in my opinion and my experience, is a culture which actually can have an action item or a conclusion from that data. So it really doesn't, there's not much value in just sitting around and analyzing data every day if there's never any kind of outcome from that. So I think that a true data literate culture is, yes, starting with the question and having a culture of questioning, but also then saying, well, okay, what is the action or the knowledge that we're going to take to actually change from now what we know?
And I could just give some practical things that we're doing to try to achieve greater data literacy here at Piedmont. I think it's really important to establish a COE that promotes the use of data assets. We have monthly Tableau training courses that we offer from beginner to advanced. Pre-COVID, we were going to all of our hospitals once a year and doing these data palooza events where we were available to data consumers that wanted to ask questions, and we were there to immediately give them answers, and we saw really good feedback from that. We would schedule time with our developers and be able to get answers really quick, and perhaps even throw some dashboards together on the fly to assist them. But roughly half my team is what we call embedded BI developer, where they make themselves available to Tableau desktop users in the organization. We currently have a ratio of about 1 to 40 Tableau desktop users, 1 BI developer to 40 Tableau desktop users, which is probably a bit much to expect from somebody, but our regular kind of engaged users might have time scheduled with those EBI folks to clear hurdles and provide education. Machine learning is one of those things that's on here too, and I expect machine learning projects to mature about like analytical dashboards did. People 8 years ago didn't really necessarily know what a dashboard was and how it would be useful. Right now, people are in the same place with machine learning, but as we get some of those projects under our belt, we think that those project requests will be almost as common as dashboard requests.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll comment on is why is this important? I think it's important to have data literacy because every day we get requests for, hey, can we do this or can we do that? And a lot of times they're not thinking about the data impact. If you start using your transactional database or system in a way that it is going to change the data, then your insights are diminished. And so it's important to kind of weave this data literate culture so that the insights can be actionable, they can be insightful, they can be trusted, but it is a challenge to get everybody to a point where they don't want to take the easy way, they want to do it the right way so that we can continue to propel the business forward.
Yeah, I love that. So just, I think the big piece here that I think all of you said in one form or fashion is that we got to take these ideas and these words and we got to put action behind it, right? If we can't change the process, if we can't actually have an effect on the organization, it's going to frustrate bright and talented people. They're going to go do something else where they actually can have that impact. And ultimately, I think we all desire to use data to have an impact. And so with that, just really super grateful to each of you. You've shared so much time with us. You've shared so much wisdom with us on this panel. I'm grateful to you personally for the time you spent talking to me on each one of these questions, and just grateful that we had an opportunity to share that with this community. So with that, we will ask y'all to close out your recording devices. As you're doing that, Elissa, I think you are going to be introducing our final guest this afternoon.
I am. And what a pleasure. I'm so delighted to be able to introduce your next speaker. And really, he doesn't really need any introduction. You probably all know him, Paul Lisborg. But just to remind you a little bit about his background, Paul is a programmer by training, having coded for nearly 20 years. And I think his new bearded look definitely fits that. After coding, his coding career, though, he joined a utility company and got into BI. And it was in 2009, I think, that the well-renowned Dan Murray introduced Paul to Tableau. And then, of course, he had many years of success there with it. And then in 2013, he joined Oldcastle, Nick's company, where actually that's where I really got to know Paul a little bit better. While there, he made a huge impact, showing how data and Tableau can improve business outcomes, but also work life too. And I'll never forget when he came and spoke at one of our biggest company meetings. And the amazing thing was he just really painted an amazing picture. Not only did we laugh so much at the way that he shared his stories, but we all learned so much. And that's one of my vivid memories of Paul, is that talk that he came and gave and just enlightened so many people. So, and also, I don't need to tell you how instrumental he's been to this group, to the Atlanta Tug. I mean, he was a founding member of it and managed the group for many years. And, I am a huge fan of ATUG. You guys have just been an incredible user group. People ask me about communities and user groups, and you're always the one that I cite, and it's because of your leaders, the ones today, but also in the past, like Paul, who've just done so much for it. And then, of course, Paul just made a huge move himself. Just last year, he joined Tableau as a customer success manager for the retail and consumer goods customers. I feel like those are some really lucky customers who get to have Paul as part of their teams. And just one last point, who else is lucky? It's Paul himself, because his life partner, Jen, is an amazing credit to him as well. And I love seeing her and him interact together and separately, and they're just an amazing group. So without further ado, it's just, again, a real pleasure to hand this off to Paul. Paul, over to you.
Thank you so much. That really was special. I really appreciate that, the kind words. So let me get my screen shared, and let's make sure I do it right. There. And share. All right. So we should all be able to see. Nelson, can you confirm?
I can confirm that I think I'm seeing your presentation screen and not your main screen.
Well, let's see if I can flip that around then. Give me just a second.
Oh, you are a fancy man. You know that trick. Good
hey,
job,
I do know. You can tell I've been doing a lot of WebExes here recently. So now you should see, yeah, there we go. So now we should be swapped around. Is that good? I am in presentation mode.
You're rocking, man. Go get it.
Okay. So, man, I tell you what, to follow that group is going to be a hard hurdle. And I only have a few minutes, but hopefully it's going to be a fun ride. I do appreciate being asked to participate today. Today's topic is, of course, data literacy. We've heard a lot about it. Going to dive into that for just a moment. But first, I want to thank once again Nelson Davis, Karen Hinson, my wife Jennifer Lisborg, for asking me to participate in today's ATUG meeting. And thank you, ATUG members and your bosses for participating. So for those of you that might be seeing my image at the very first time, you're going, man, he looks familiar. But I can assure you I was not a singer from REM. I never hosted a late night talk show host or a late night talk show. And this one's near and dear to my heart. No, I am not the ASL interpreter for the governor of Georgia, even though that picture probably looks more like me than anything else. I used to run ATUG, and more importantly, I guess, here way back in 2009, I was a founding member of ATUG. So I love ATUG, everything that it's done for me, both professionally and personally. The relationships that I have made are just absolutely off the chart. So let's talk a little bit about data literacy. But first, I want to kind of bring you to that point. So a couple of weeks ago, I think we all saw, watched SpaceX, the Dragon return, Demo 2 return from the International Space Station. And, you know, I started really thinking it was kind of a nostalgic moment for me, at least, because we haven't seen something splash down in the ocean in quite some time. All through the 80s and 90s, we were we saw the shuttle program, but seeing something splash down in the middle of the ocean like that was kind of cool. And it got me thinking about, you know, my childhood. Now I'm probably a little older than most, but I watched the Apollo program, and of course I was watching Apollo 11 when it took astronauts into space and then actually landed 2 men on the moon. But as much as this is, you know, there's a lot of technology behind us, I want you to focus on just really one picture here. And I'm going to blow this one up. This is the Saturn V rocket that's launching. It's, you know, just a couple of seconds into its launch. But the thing what I want you to focus is right here. That is either a 1968 or 69 Oldsmobile 442. And right next to it there is, once again from the same era, a Chevelle Super Sport. Now, it just didn't happen that there was some kind of a classic car show that was occurring on that Wednesday of the Saturn V launch. This because it was July 16th, 1969, when we sent men first into orbit and then into space and then finally destination the moon 50 years ago. And that kind of got me thinking about technology, because the brilliance behind the Saturn V and the Apollo program was just way ahead of its time. And I started thinking about calculators. You know, in 1969, the first Texas Instruments calculator was still 3 years away. Think about that. We were still doing everything, you know, by longhand. Microwave ovens. What would I do without my microwave oven? It was not introduced until the late 70s. So we were almost 10 years away from a microwave oven. Remote controls, they were out in the 1950s, but it didn't really become popular until 1980. And of course, we didn't even think about Alexa. So, I mean, that's where the technology was at that point. So I wanted to compare this mammoth, you know, Saturn V program to something that we could all understand today. And I thought, well, what could I compare it to? Well, let's compare it to an iPhone 11, okay? Something that we can all hold in our hands. So to give you some just kind of a basis, the latest iPhone has 4 gigabytes of RAM. That is more than 1 million times more memory than the Apollo computer had in RAM. 1 million more times in the palm of your hand. The iPhone has 512 gig in read-only memory, ROM memory, which is 7 million times more than that of the guidance computer. Finally, you'll all appreciate this. The processor itself, the thing that actually did the work, the processor ran at a blistering speed of 0.043 megahertz on the Apollo 11 capsule. That's 0.043. The latest iPhones are estimated to run somewhere in the 2,500 megahertz range. That means that your iPhone in your pocket is 100,000 times has more processing than the Apollo 11, which sent men to the moon. So, golly, think, man, with all that technology in our fingertips, why do we still continue to struggle with making data-driven decisions? Well, to add to that, last February, before COVID even began, this is 2019, Gartner released research stating that by 2020, this year, 50% of organizations will lack sufficient AI and data literacy skills to achieve business value. That's a troubling statistic. So let's talk a little bit more about the data literacy aspect of that statement. So what is data literacy? Now, I like this one. It's a little long-winded, but I like it because it is the definition that MIT uses, and I especially love the last part, and that is the ability to read, work, and analyze and argue with data, so employees. And notice they didn't say knowledge workers, so employees. Everyone within the organization can contribute more to their roles and the organizations. Data literacy empowers workers to ask the right questions, to build knowledge, to make decisions, and to be able to communicate meaning to others. Now, I've shortened it a little bit to be just the ability to read, work, and analyze and argue with data. This is a simplified version of MIT's. But you're saying now, okay, I hear you, but I have data coming in from everywhere. I have ERP, I have CRM, I have production data, I have HR, finance. It's overwhelming and complex. And that is 100% all true. We live in an era of tremendous data velocity, the speed at which we can collect and it can be processed. But let's not make the consumption so complex, which we tend to do by overthinking it. And this, I'll go back to Rachel talking about being able to simplify explanations, or Steve, who said we want to make sure that we can simplify, and so that an executive can get the answer that he needs quickly without having to go through spreadsheets or have to sit there and ponder as to what to do. So before I get into the dashboard aspect, I want to bring something to that everyone can relate to, and that is your parking signs. Now, I live in a small town just south of Atlanta. We don't have parking signs that look like this. We have, it's don't park here under any circumstances, pretty easy. But where I see these parking signs are usually the places that I don't want to see parking signs. I either am renting a car in a big city and I'm not familiar with driving, or I have children in the back and I need to get off to the side of the road and take them to their destination. And so I have cars beeping at me going, make your decision. Are you going to park here or you're not? Well, I don't know if I'm going to park here because it's going to take me an hour and a half to identify whether or not I'm going to get a ticket or not. Wouldn't it be so much easier if we had something that would just tell you what the parking schedule is? Monday through Friday, you can't park here from 7 to 4. Saturdays, there's an hour or so, and then it's free parking throughout. It makes it so much simpler to take all of that information and put it into something really that's quite visual, and more municipalities are doing this. They're understanding, hey, we can't have this, all these signs. People don't know because they're actually making a decision on data that they can't even interpret. Well, we do the same with our analysis. And of course, we talk about spreadsheets. And to be honest with you, we are attempting to analyze data in the same manner we were doing in the 1980s when we had hundreds of rows of data. However, today we have millions, tens of millions, or in a case I've seen Mark Jackson present from Piedmont, billions of rows of data on nothing but temperature readings from all 11 of his hospitals. There's no way to analyze that in this type of format. Now, here, and I use this all the time, we have 24 rows by 12 columns of data. That's 288 data points. If we were all in the room together, the first thing I would ask is, how many people would consider this big data? I'd ask you to raise your hand, and there would be nobody that raised their hand. I ask the same question of Emory and Georgia Tech students when I'm giving a workshop. And once again, their answer is always a resounding no, this is not big data. And then I ask the stunning question, how many 9s are in this data set? And I sit there and wait and wait and wait. And finally, after 30, 45 seconds, somebody will say 23. And then somebody on the other part of the room, 24. And the other one, no, 27. The answer is wrong. And these are smart kids. They're in there, they're competitive, they want to be able to raise their answer and get the answer right. And more often than not, it takes a long time to make that to perform that analysis, and then they usually get the answer wrong. So all I had to do, speaking to Steve's point, was kind of make a highlight table. And now they can easily go and quick, and everyone's going to get the answer right on this. They're going to say 25, and they're going to do it in about 5 seconds, because they can see real quickly how many 9s are out there, because we've made that, we've kind of pronounced that. But that answers the one question, because now I want to know, well, how many 12s are there? How many 11s? What's the comparison? We know now that there's 25 9s, but where does that compare to the other numbers? So what do? In the world of Tableau, we visualize this data. And once again, to Steve Wexler's point, probably 90% of us would use a bar chart. You can see here that let me get to the right monitor. So right here we have, there's Mr. 9 right there, and you can see he's ranked 5th. Okay, and that number 11 had 34 instances, and this, maybe even using a tree map, now we see that not only 11 had 34 instances, but it represents about 12% of the data. So you're able to answer more than just the one question. So how do we become data driven? And I'm gonna give you, there's a number of, and people have hit upon this, and I've given everything there, and you'll see the 2 C's of data literacy and the 5 C's of data literacy. I have a little bit more than that, but I've given a lot of thought as to what my perception of data literacy is, and this is with about 20 years within within BI space. The first is curiosity, just simple curiosity about the data. When we hired people, we knew that we could train them on technology. We asked them, are you curious about the data? Do you want to know what this data set is perhaps trying to say? My former CFO, Ian Crabtree, always challenged me with a very simple question. Find something within the data that I don't already know. We know what sales were, day over day sales. What should we be looking at? Margins? Is there a specific subset within those sales that we might be able to monopolize because the margins are better? So that answers the question of, yes, you should be curious about the data, but the data that you present should be actionable. Challenge. We talked a little bit about this too. Challenge the data, and this is more from both the analyst and from senior management. When was this updated? Are there outliers that were skewing the data? How would you rate the accuracy of this data? But the one thing I want for you to keep in mind is that you cannot be held hostage waiting for the perfect data set, because I've got news for you. I have never seen a perfect data set. I was just looking at a data set that has been out regarding COVID now since February. We're more than 120 days in, and they were misreporting a state because there was nothing that differentiated the state. And the reason this is kind of personal for me is because they didn't differentiate the state of Georgia with the country of Georgia. And so when aggregated, you were actually aggregating data both from the state of Georgia and from the country of Georgia. Now, they have since had that fixed, but they went about 150 days where nobody challenged them on that. So it's important to challenge the data. Charles Babbage said this: errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. So use the data at hand. You still have to make that kind of gut decision. Be creative. And I love this because my first opportunity to attend a Tableau conference was 10 years ago. I attended 10 conferences in a row, and I got to sit every morning and eat breakfast with Stephen Few. And his quote was, numbers have an important story to tell. They rely on you to give them a voice. Communicate. And once again, Rachel hit upon this. You've got to be able to communicate your results. You've got to be able to communicate your process to management in an effective way that they understand. And I love this quote because everybody knows who made this quote, Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. You've got to be able to, whether it's a data model, whether it's a visualization, you've got to be able to explain your numbers. I love this one. Commit to running meetings that are data driven. Scrap the scripted PowerPoint presentations, run meetings on a visualized data. And finally, collaborate. Do what you're doing right now. Reach out to other people within ATUG. Reach out by joining a group on the Tableau website. It is amazing how many people, not only within your own organization, want to share what they have learned. They want to share it with others even outside of your organization. So I'm going to leave with just a couple things. McKinsey has been doing a lot of analysis over the summer, and basically the surveys they're conducting saying it has forced every company into a massive experiment as to how to be more nimble, flexible, and fast. People are working from home. They've got to be able to make quick decisions that are accurate. And from that, what the CEOs are saying from that same study is we have removed boundaries. This is a perfect time. This is that we are now at a crossroads where we can do this. They are removing boundaries and silos in ways they never thought were possible, and they are adopting technology now in days, something that it would have taken years to do pre-COVID. And this is probably my most favorite quote from a CEO. They didn't mention his name, but decision-making accelerated when we cut the BS. We make decisions in one meeting, limit groups to no more than 9, and we have banned PowerPoint. So a couple of points of reading. I'm not going to ask you to, run out and purchase statistics and probability books. That's data science. That's not what this is about. Here are 3 fun reads. Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Freakonomics. It gives you a different way of looking at and understanding data. And then Avoiding Data Pitfalls by Ben Jones. 3 great books that I would encourage you to read. I'd also encourage you to visit the Tableau website, as well as the Salesforce and Work.com. Have all kinds of great information about this subject, as well as trying to get back to work in a safe manner. So with that, I want to say thank you for having me. Please stay safe, and I look forward to connecting with you all soon.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was awesome. Nelson, do we have any more slides? I know we're about to wrap up.
We do. Karen, why don't you take us away here?
Yes. We just want to remind everyone, we hope you can join us next month. Our meeting next month, September 17th. I believe that is the 3rd Thursday. Meetings are typically the 3rd Thursday of every month. Join us next month. Another virtual meeting. We'll meet at 1 p.m. It won't be quite as long of a meeting, but we will have 2 amazing speakers, and we will hear from Carl with Interworks and Kelly on demystifying COVID data. With that, thanks again so much for joining. And I just want to say welcome again to Anna. We really appreciate your willingness to step up and join us as a new leader. Thank you so much to our panel and speakers today as well.
Thank you. Great session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye,
Have
y'all.
a great rest of your week. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Anna.
Is this like the episode of the Walton, like in the end of the Waltons, where it's like, good night, Billy Bob. Good night, Nelson.
Love that. We should end every ATUG like
That's what
that.
we should do.
We should totally
Good
do
night,
that.
Good night,
John Boy.
Steve.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Moon.
Good night, Jen. Good
Read
night.
that book. Many
Good night,
times.
Andy Piper.
Love it. All right, peeps. Be good.